Welcome to the Endurance Horse Podcast, where endurance riders from all across the globe gather, sharing their stories, goals, and progress as they train for and compete in endurance events at every level. So kick off your shoes, pull up a chair, and listen as we gather around the virtual campfire and listen to friends from across the world. Welcome to episode 45 of Endurance Horse Podcast. Maybe you're one of the many people tracking the progress of the Tevis Cup that was held this past weekend, July 24th, 2021. Per usual, the Tevis was held under the last full moon in July. This moon is often referred to as the rider's moon, and it is under this moon that the annual Tevis Cup is ridden. This was the 66th annual riding of the Tevis Cup, and once again this year, riders had to deal with smoke from wildfires. Tevis has often been called the granddaddy of them all and has inspired endurance events all across the world and even as far as Australia, where the Tom Quilty Gold Cup itself was inspired by the Tevis Cup. Tevis, unlike the Quilty though, historically is held at the same venue every year, and although there may have been some slight changes on the trail over these last 66 years, many of the milestones have always remained the same since 1955. Although many people think of Tevis as a ride with a lot of climbing, and this is likely due to the world-famous Cougar Rock photos that we see online and in print all across the world. Actually, the numbers of climb are pretty large. It's 17,000 feet of elevation gain, but there is also over 21,000 feet of elevation loss during the Tevis Cup. The Haggin Cup is awarded to the rider whose horse is in the most superior physical condition of the first 10 horses who cross the finish line. When listening to the vets present the Haggin Cup this year, I was really touched by the practicality of which the vets said they used to judge the Haggin Cup. And it was simply put that it was the horse who the vets felt the most comfortable saying, that's the horse I would get back on and go do the trail again, or get back on and take back out the next day. So it was the horse that had the most health, the most vim, the most vigor, the most spark left, and was ready to go. I did ask about conditioning to a few of the riders, and one of the most common themes I heard again and again was that if you're going to ride the Tevis, you need to ride hills and more hills. And the common thread also seemed to be not at speed. So some trotting, but often walking, because some of I won't get into it. That's in the interview, right? So here we go. Without further ado, I bring to you episode 45 of Endurance Horse Podcast, the Tevis 2021 Haggin Cup winner, Dr. J. Mero. Today on Endurance Horse Podcast, we are talking to the 2021 Haggin Cup winner, Dr. J. Mero. Dr. Mero is a graduate of Cornell University, Large Animal Medicine, and owns Mariposa Equine Services. Dr. Mero is also a contributor to the Horse Equine Innovators podcast. We will provide a link to that in your show notes. And so, I always ask, how did you get into horses? I know that seems a far leap from Haggin Cup, but I think it's something that's pretty interesting to know how everybody got in.
I am one of those that I'm that every little girl who never grew out of the dream of, riding and owning horses. Every little girl who dreamed of being a horse doctor. And I pinch myself every day that it never stopped for me. It didn't become about boys or makeup or, any Barbie dolls or anything else. It was always horses. So I have an unusual background that basically grew up in suburban New Jersey and then spent summers with relatives. Often my grandparents were dairy farmers, but had stopped dairy farming by the time I was young. So I was just that kid that begged, borrowed, and stole and got on anything with hair and shoveled manure. I worked in through basically starting at junior high and through high school. My best friend and I, she had already been having lessons, and some of it's from my mother. My mother loved horses and owned horses intermittently, and there was a divorce. So whenever I was with my mother, she always seemed to land either with friends that had horses, or so it probably started there. But I mean, as far back as my memory goes, horses were just the thing for me. So I shoveled a lot of manure to get a chance to ride horses, and any horse I could, and really didn't have very formal lessons, but got to sit on the fence and watch the rather wealthy kids get their lessons. And so it was all just grit, and then just worked in barns in New Jersey all through high school, college, any chance I got. Yeah, I'd say the big picture was the dream never stopped for me. I just always wanted to be around horses.
So how did you find endurance?
That's kind of cool. So I did not even know endurance existed as a sport until I was an intern. So I got all the way through vet school in upstate New York, still into horses, did an internship in Canada at the University of Ontario Veterinary College, University of Guelph, Ontario, and met Yvette Vinton, who is an international rider there, but also all the staff there, they were very involved. There were several pockets of endurance rides up in Ontario, and that's how I got introduced to the sport. And by then I had been owning Morgan horses, managed to cobble together enough money to get some Morgan horses. I really wanted to do Morgan preservation, and owned a few Morgan horses, and had been showing and already was soured, if you will, with the subjectiveness of the show ring. Many of us find our way to endurance from the frustrations from the show ring. No matter what discipline, you're in, you get frustrated with the subjectiveness. And I had been an athlete my whole life. I'd been a long distance runner. And so I was sort of already used to working hard and training hard, and been in track and field, and I actually was a javelin thrower as well. So so it all just kind of fit with, wow, I could live and die by my own hand. It was up to me whether, you would be rewarded with whether you appropriately prepared your horse or not. And it wasn't going to be, you weren't paying for some person's opinion. That immediately just tuned into me. But I do remember I was an intern when I started training. I moved after my first 6 months of an intern. Then I moved a horse up, found a barn not far from the hospital. And if I basically wasn't having to be at the hospital, I was with the horse. And I do remember trotting down the road thinking, "Oh my God, I want to do what?" Because back then, you're trotting miles and miles and miles. And I it's funny because people ask me now, and I just, over time, you eventually build up this musculature in your own self, and muscle memory and joint memory, and now you can go long gaps and ride a long time. But I distinctly remember the beginning with, wow, these people are crazy. So I do wish I'd known about it even sooner. I didn't. It's funny how this neat little sport is, a lot of people still don't know about us. Oh.
Well, that's kind of part of the point of Endurance Horse Podcast, was to get the word out there. I was actually at the Midwest Horse Fair with my photography booth, and then I just was trying to also contacted ARC and said, "Can you send me some things I can hand out, since I'm going to be there anyway, because endurance was not represented there." There were over 30,000 people there at the Midwest Horse Fair, and full riders who had stopped by. I would ask, "Hey, did you know about endurance riding? Would you like, this pamphlet?" And at a horse fair, they had no idea that endurance existed at all.
Wow.
So that was kind of the part of the podcast, is I try to get other riders into it, to say, hey, it does exist, because in the Midwest, they didn't think it was a Midwest thing. They thought it was a coast thing, either coast.
Right.
But the Midwest has a lot of endurance riding.
Yes, they do. Yep.
So I recently read this quote, and it made me think of you. I'm like a lot of other people. I was staying up way too late watching everybody cross the finish line, and then watching the great volunteers did the live videos of the Buckles and the Haggin and the Tevis Cup Award. So I heard this quote, or read it, and it said, "Do not focus on your fear, focus on what you want." And I thought, that's exactly what you have done, because the Haggin Cup has been a long-time goal for you.
I am of that opinion. And those of us that are deep into the sport, I think, have that opinion. there's a couple roads to this. So my very first endurance, I went back home to New York, prepared a horse. It wasn't until many years later I started having children. So I was sort of, I was vetting and sort of loosely attached. My first ride wasn't until 2003, and I went back up to Canada, and I was a veterinarian, and I did a lot of research. So I was very well prepared, and we were winning the race. It was very competitive as an FEI, dual FEI, and a famous veterinarian up there named Dr. Stan Alchemade, who contemporary of Dr. Art King. Art's another one that started me, because I started all my endurance in the East, and he right then and there drilled into me. This was almost 20 years ago. He said, "Well, do you want to win, or do you want to get best condition?" In other words, ratchet it back a little bit here. You're pretty comfortably in the win. You want to come in and really present this horse and have it and take care of it. And it just sort of right then oriented my thinking to winning isn't everything. Taking care of your horse is the most important thing. I will confess, like every other probably, rider that aspires to the upper edge, for many, many years, I thought my goal was to win Tevis. I'll be the first to admit that. And I would say it was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I kind of came around to, no, that's, and there's a couple reasons for that, having ridden enough. And there was a year I was actually doing very well and pulled winning. And at Quarry, and if you look at my first Tevis, we sort of inadvertently was a top 10. It was not at all planned. And if you look at what's happened in the last 10, 15, 20 years, Tevis has now become brutally competitive. The top 10 is quite competitive. The times are tight. With the time that I was 10th in 07 is out a couple of hours slower than we were. It's all changing. It's very, very competitive. The horses have everybody's gotten better at it. The horse flesh is, I applaud the horse. There's more competitive. It's wonderful. I'm not complaining at all. So it's somewhere along the line I realized, this trail is really tough. It really eats up a lot of horses. And I said it just again on Saturday, every time we get out of the high country and we get close to Robinson, as a veterinarian, I shake my head with, oh my God, how do any of us get through this ride with sound horses? This is really rugged and hard. So I realized that I personally probably did not want to ever push a horse to the point where it needed to finish at like 9 to 10 o'clock at night to try to 9:30, 10:30 to try to win. And that last stretch from Quarry in to race that in, and we've had a bunch of these in the last few years, to really have to go smashing through that to win, I don't want to do it. So if I ever win, it'll probably be an accident, or it inadvertent, or just be a great day. And that's when I realized, to present that horse the next day, sound as you can be, happy, perky, bodied out, bellied, looking like, that was that. It was then. It was a few years ago. I was like, this is the goal. And I agree with you. Most of us that are long time horsemen have now appreciated that. And that was I wrote a Facebook post, and I was commenting that really that's it. The essence of the sport. I'm so grateful. In the early days, we had some trouble. I wasn't part of it then. I was, I was probably just too young, but there was maybe some trouble. But early on, our 4 founders of our sport caught on to the fact that this is not the point to ride a horse to within an inch of its life, to make it look like beef jerky, to get 99% out of your horse to win. That's not what our goal is.
Right.
And I applaud that because, and as time has gone on, as you said, the Haggin Cup has now gotten the prestige that it deserves. That's the goal. That's the goal. Come back on Sunday with a horse. And this mare finished in 19, and she would not have been sound enough to have presented that day. So it's been a process for her. We, like a lot of these race-bred animals, now we're struggling with some feet issues. As a veterinarian, I've diagnosed a bunch of feet issues. We got to get a little better with our feet breeding, I think, on our race-breds. So it's been a tinkering process for her on finding out what works best for her. And it's funny, we did not ride Saturday to win the Haggin at all. It's the first year I finally had a horse ready for my daughter to actually be with me. We generally, in the last 3-4 years, 17, we all rode together, my daughter, my son, and myself. And 18, I rode with a friend. 19, I tried to stay with my daughter, but this mare I'm on is quite talented and was just pulsing in ridiculously. So I went on, and my daughter rode with my Australian friend. And so this was the year that we were like, well, we've got this next mare coming up. Let's hope we can stay together. So that really had been the goal, to kind of toy with the idea of getting into top 10, but making sure we finished. And we just had one of those stellar days. We just did. You know, it was just everything worked, and we just kept going. And it probably was about halfway through the day that I was like, wow, this mare's handling these rocks really well. Maybe we'll get to present for best condition. So it was fairy tale weekend that it all worked out the way it did.
So as you mentioned your daughter, you two rode the entire ride together this time, and your mare's name was Lena, and
correct.
Raina's is Eclipse, or did I hear on a video that you call her Clippy?
Yeah, we nicknamed her Clippy. Yep.
So what was that like to ride across that finish line together, placing 6th and 7th in the top 10?
Oh, and I heard it all day. My son has ridden, but he's now moved on. My youngest daughter rode a little bit with us, but confessedly loves cow horse stuff. So she's now moved on and is doing cow horse and owns a quarter horse. And so to have this daughter absolutely share every bit of this passion of the sport with me step for step I hope that there's a lot of famous mother-daughter and third generation. You have Nihal, you have third generation. I hope I've spawned a dynasty and we'll have third and fourth generation. You know, we intend to breed these mares and have our own horses as well. So it's priceless. It's priceless to just have it, and to have your children crew for you. It's it's amazing. It's the coolest, and it's interesting because this sport, because it's so individualistic. You know, a lot of the riders don't have children. You know, some of them don't have children at all. Right. It sort of selects a certain personality that a lot of them, and some of the upper riders don't have children. And so to be able to raise a child to be that competitive, and I did tease her. She's ridden fast and she's done very well, but we had not ridden Tevis that fast together. And I warned her a month or two out. I said, you need to really be ready for this. The canyons are going to be rough. It's going to be hot. That's where I tend to make a lot of time, and you need to be real. And she did. She was ready for it. And I think it was really special for her too. We had talked about it. It was funny. It was only about a half hour out. And I said, okay, now when we go under the banner, we're going to hold hands up. And she's like, oh, I'm so glad you said that, Mom, because I was going to say it too.
So tell me a little bit about your mares. They're half sisters. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the cool thing is actually I reminded myself they're 3/4 sisters. So the fathers are half brothers. I personally have been busy a couple days tracking down through. So the mares, I believe a lot of their talent is coming from their dam, who is old Polish breeding. I've had many series of different bred things for endurance, and I like many people now. I really love the minds of race breds. And these are mostly their domain half brothers, and the temperament is wonderful. My mare she's just so polite. She just never says no. She just is always, she may question you, are you sure we have to? But she just never says no. They're very, they're intense, and yes, she can be a little redheaded. You've got a lot of energy there, but you just respect it, and it's fine. But I am going to spend the next while trying to figure out how to find some more of that old line breeding through the dam line, because I think I clearly have good heart rates. The two mares pulsed together, pulse per pulse, and they were ridiculous. There was no, places where you normally would have trouble having horses pulse, Deadwood, Chicken Hawk, places like that. These horses came in and were down within a minute or two. That's just ridiculous. I don't know that I've ever had two horses be that talented in their heart rates. Their CRIs were ridiculous all day. Like 40s, 50 something, and then 40 something. They were just shocking. I mean, I knew they were that talented, but to be put under that pressure was pretty amazing. So I need to capitalize on that and keep trying to go with that. And I want to go down through some of the older Polish lines because I feel like I need to fix feet.
Right.
I need to get a stronger, tougher foot.
I've always believed that it is that mare line and maybe even the top line on the mare, the sire line there that goes back to the grandfather. I've kind of noticed that the horses I really like, they tend to resemble that part of their pedigree more, and I've never understood, the big push, well, it's probably money, but for stallions to be the big deal, because I've always believed it, 70+% comes from the mama.
I would agree. And you talk to breeders of any, right, and most, doesn't matter which, whether it's Arabs or others, most very knowledgeable breeders will agree with you. It's all in your dam lines. That's right.
So, yeah, I got to see her thanks to the volunteers who did the live feed. I mean, she looked like she didn't work the day before. She looked ready to go. But also, you looked ready to go. So I was wondering if you could talk to our listeners a little bit about what you do personally to make sure your fitness is ready for Tevis.
So I am older now, and because of that, I feel like I need to spend as much time. I always have to do a two-prong approach. I have to run, so I have to be able to handle canyons. So I'm older. I have some knee arthritis. I have some other things. So I confess I don't run all year, but definitely starting beginning of spring. And I'm a horse vet, so springtime is nuts for me. By about the time I get out the other side of breeding season, so May, June, I can usually find the time to start running. So I'll run 3, 4, 5 miles a day, every day, at least months before Tevis. And then to withstand a high-end 100, I do better if I ride a lot. So we have 4 or 5 horses going. And so I will ideally in several months leading up to something like Tevis, I will actually ride somewhere between 75 and 100 miles a week on various horses. And that's my personal. That helps me. I'm sure I could do a lot less. And often the weeks coming in, so your own horses, your going horses need to do less because you're peaked and you're just kind of coasting along. So I might the week or two before I'm not doing like 100 miles, but that seems to work with me. But certainly aerobic fitness is a big one. I always have to fight my weight. So if I keep my weight down, that's helpful. It's amazing at 50 something how much better you feel when you are not carrying a lot of excess weight. Every winter I seem to get a little too chunky, and then I feel so much better in the spring and the summer when I dump it off. It's funny, but yeah, I think to be a top end rider and really go at speed and to ask a lot of your horses, you need to be at a reasonable body weight and you need to be reasonably fit, because if you're going to be a hindrance to your horse, that's ridiculous.
Right.
You can make it so much harder on your horse. You need to be setting up there, not smashing down on their back. You need to be flowing with them, helping them. And so Raina is because she's either been school or working full time. She can't ride that many hours. She rides with me on the weekend. She'll put, 25, 30 miles with me on each day of a weekend and maybe one day a week. But she will work out every day, and because she's 19, 20, she gets away with that.
So, Endurance Horse Podcast mostly is about the stories and getting to know the people, which we've done. But I always get requests for people to get tips of actual nuts and bolts things. So, as we close up here, I had 2 questions for you, and one would be, and I think you're so qualified to answer this, is what is one piece of advice you would give to riders who might be riding LD now or 50s and they would like to try 100? What would be like your one best tip for them? First
of all, I would tell them to do it. Don't be intimidated and do it. You don't think you can't, you can. And then the second piece of advice would be, so if you look at this mare's record, I hold to the old school that it takes 3 years to build a 100 horse. This mare was three years in the making. And normally a lot of people like to go grab stuff off the racetrack, because I'm sure a lot of us kind of talk behind the scenes. Yeah, you might be able to chop off a year, if you will. And this mare was, quote, hardened on the track. But for me, so you can maybe do 100 sooner. And we did. 19, I think, was her first 100. But you don't ask for this effort until many years in. So my big advice would be, yes, you can. Yes, you can. But 2, put the time in, the hours in, and not at speed. Go slow to go fast. Go slow earlier. I'm a big fan of one of the reasons there are many reasons we moved west, but I absolutely adore multi-days. And that's really my secret to prepping horses is many hours on trail doing multi-days, because I think that is what hardens the horse and the rider and tells you what. So if you can't do multi-days, then try to do a back-to-back 50, try to do, and when we don't do them, I'm known at home, like we don't do LDs because I can do all the LDs I want on my own mat. Like we routinely do LDs at home. So it would not be uncommon for us to do several 25-milers back to back to back, 2 or 3 days in a row over a weekend. Like if there's nothing that's strategically placed to use an event to get a horse ready, we'll do that at home. So
the last question I had for you was specifically towards Tevis. So if somebody has done hundreds before, but maybe they live in Kansas or somewhere where it's very flat, how would you suggest that they train for the heat and the hills?
So I still use even though I live in the mountains and train in the mountains, I still do what we call interval days, where I'm a big fan of putting depth in a horse by doing, again, I was an athlete and I hated interval days on the track, but it's the concept of putting an animal in anaerobic or increased oxygen debt. So you're running a horse up to where their heart rate gets up to 200 for a certain period, a brief period of time, and then you drop them down. My worry, I have some friends that do this. They'll go out and do it on like flat tracks or very slight inclines. I'm afraid I'm going to blow something on a tendon. That scares me. So my preference is even somebody because I hear from flatlanders, they can usually still find a hill. And when I lived back east, I would trailer to a certain hill. And as long as it's like even a quarter mile is probably not, if that's all you got, that's all you got. But if you can find something that's a half mile, a mile, I would, that's what I do. I start trotting up, and then we're going to do a canter up, and then it's still rare for me to really put a horse flat out. I don't. You generally, if that hill is steep enough, you'll get the heart rate up to 200, and you're gonna go up that hill, and then you're gonna come down the hill, and and if it's a mile, I probably do 4 or 5 repeats of that after I've adequately warmed up, and then I'm gonna adequately warm down. That would be a secret. That would be how people could get a horse ready for something like Tevis.
And again, that would be on a horse that's already legged up and fit, right?
For sure. For sure. Well, and the cool thing is, even if, let's say your horse is not its 3rd year, it's 1 or 2 year, then what you do with something like that is you just trot. You trot up the hill, but you don't ask for the heavy duty running up a hill until they're legged up enough. Exactly.
Could you talk a little bit about what it was like and what that ride was like at night and coming across the No Hands Bridge?
We figured out early on that my mare also, she's so dependable. You don't need anything, not even glow sticks. So I was at Francisco's with her the first year, and I had glow sticks on her breast collar, and the volunteers noticed that they hadn't even been popped yet. And they're like, "Oh, let's snap these and we'll get these." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, fine. And we started to go over the edge to go leave the hold and go down in the dark. And the mare was like, "Whoa, what is that?" And she's throwing herself backwards, and she's blink. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, you don't jump off, rip them all off, take them off." And she shakes herself. She's like, "Thank you." And off we go. And so she is there are, my daughter likes to ride with glow sticks. This mare is just, and I've had the privilege to, most of the ones I've been on, I've had the privilege of being able to turn off the light. The one year I rode with all my kids, I did use a red light because I think it was just, generally if I use anything, it would just be red. But this mare just is like, I got this. And you went there, and there's horrible periods of still very rough trail. And you just sit there and she'll slow down when it's terrible and pick her way through it. And then she, she just picks her way back up. Okay, we're trotting now. And I mean, there was maybe one or two there are a couple places where there are some crisscrossing trail where a horse is following the trail. Like you had to guide her through a couple places. Like I could see where they were glow sticking and there were trail intersections. But to be able to just sit up there and trust this horse and the pitch, because when you're riding that fast, you generally don't get that moon. It doesn't help you at all. It doesn't come up over the ridge until you're almost done. So you're just in the dark. And the whiteness of the paths sometimes show up a little bit, but I tell people this all the time, it's magical to just be with your horse and trust them. And it is not, it's crazy. I mean, you come down into some of these turns on the canyon edges and it is just black. Like you cannot see your hand in front of your face, but the horse is like, I got this. Let's go. Just, go with me. It's really neat. It's indescribable almost. It's amazing.
What was your favorite part of this ride?
Oh boy. This year there was only one part where I was feeling myself sort of tore up a little tired. That was actually after midway through the California loop. And then I don't have it was all good. We had one Robinson Flat. She was a little flat. She was not wanting to eat as much as she wanted. So then I spent the next section between then and Last Chance a little like worried about her, but she was perfectly, she was fine. I don't know. I don't like the canyons. Nobody does. That first canyon is really just a booger. The high country is always beautiful, always. Of course, this year it was smoky. It was interesting how smoky it was. I love how the mare just goes hop, hop, hop over Cougar Rock. So I was leading my daughter and we had another friend with us briefly, and we were just behind another group who all, this happens to horses sometimes. You're coming up to Cougar Rock and so many people are taking the bypass now. I go over always. We always go over. Mm-hmm. And, so she sees these 5 or 6 horses go the other way. And I'm like, nope, we're going this way. Mm-hmm. And she reorients and like, okay. And then you're hop, 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 and you're up and over. I mean, maybe that. I don't know. The fact that it was always, my favorite part was always the fact that when I asked her to do something or I asked, she did it. And then, the other thing is when you're on a good horse, you're not kicking it. Like I said, in the dark, in the finish, when she would walk, she's done through the bad terrain. She picks herself back up and like, okay, we're trotting now. It isn't, I'm so damn tired. I just want to walk all the way to the finish. She wanted to keep going. She had that much, left in her. That's such a cool feeling. Mm-hmm. Late at night, that late, you're approaching, 10, 11 o'clock after you've been in the saddle since 4 a.m. I mean, that's just so cool.
Mm-hmm. There's one thing that I thought of to ask you, because you brought it up a little bit. I don't want to regret not asking you. So you spoke to the point of tapering, which I imagine you also got from your long distance running background. But sometimes when I see people conditioning, even for a 50 or something, and they seem to never taper. So could you just speak to what tapering is and how you would taper before a ride like a 50 or any 100?
So the trouble with the horses is, I will be very upfront and honest. Most elite horses are a tie-up waiting to happen every step. And this mare will tie up. So you have to find that bubble, if you will. And she couldn't even start nationals because I had some tie-up trouble with her before nationals. So I was on edge all the last month or so leading in. But so normally we will train quite hard until maybe 2 to 3 weeks before a big 100. Mm-hmm. And then say at the 3, maybe about 2 weeks before a big 100 is probably going to be our last long ride, that 2-week weekend. And then, so that's that last 2 weeks for us is where we're really tapering in. And so no more 25s. They probably did 12s and 13 milers, long warm-ups, some a little bit of speed work, if you will, not running hard, but some at speed and then down. And then when you have a tie-up horse, like you can't go 4 or 5 days. Like this mare never had more than 2 days off. And in that last 2 weeks, she worked in week 2 before the ride. She worked at least every other day. And then I will say, the Sunday before Tevis, she had a 10 miler. Monday she was off. Tuesday before Tevis, from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, she was rode every day because I did not want to have a tie-up. Now, by that, it meant it was only like 5 to 8 miles every time. But it would have a long, long, long warm-up, several miles of some nice at-speed work, and then a nice long warm down. So that's still an example of tapering, though, because you're not doing long rides anymore too much. You would never do an interval workout in your taper period. So tapers generally are like 2 to 3 weeks, depending on who you're talking to.
And I think that's really helpful because maybe people that don't have a running background wouldn't know. Maybe they wouldn't know that, and that might be a key that somebody really needed to hear today. So I thank you for sharing that with me. Well, Jay, it's been an absolute honor to talk with you. It was a wonderful thing to see how much spirit your mare still had the next day, and absolutely congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I know you're a busy lady, and I know you're back to work already, so I should probably let you go and get your day started.
It was so much fun. And I thank you for spreading the word. I think this sport should, we need it to grow. It's just a really wonderful option for people that own horses to do this. All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity to have a chat. It was great.
Thanks, Jay. It's been a pleasure. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.
To share your story on Endurance Horse Podcast, send an email to endurancehorsepodcast@gmail.com.